I want to formally welcome everyone to our webinar today. The title of our webinar is Unlocking the Power of Your Data to Build Consensus. My name is Sean Roseman. I'm Numetric's Vice President of Customer Success, and I'll be your host today, and we'll be guiding the conversation around this best practice panel that we'll be going through today. Again, we're so grateful for everyone taking some time out of their day to spend with us to discuss this important topic and to hear and learn from your peers from other states that have partnered with Numetric to solve some of these problems. And we're excited to get started today. A couple of just quick housekeeping items to kick us off. If you do have questions for Numetric or for any members of the panel, you can submit those questions via Zoom, which is the tool we're using for the webinar today. If you have any connectivity issues, feel free to chat to us, and we'll do our best on the support side to help you with any of those issues that might pop up. If you're having any trouble kind of seeing the slides or the information that is being presented, for the record, most of the webinar today will be conversational, so there isn't a lot for you to necessarily look at or see from the slide perspective. But if you are looking for more information, there's a full screen mode that allows you to zoom if you're needing a little bit more visibility with the slides, if you're in a conference room, for example. The other thing to note, and this obviously makes it easy from a kind of note-taking or kind of, managing how you can get the most out of this, we'll be making the recording available after the event to all of you that are joined here today. And then one last just thing to note, one of our panelist members who we'll introduce here shortly, John Tomlinson, has been called into a meeting that he'll have to drop off early, and just wanted to acknowledge and also thank him for being willing to participate given his busy schedule. So with that, we're going to go ahead and introduce our panelists today. And we're going to start with John Tomlinson. John Tomlinson has been the Highway Safety Manager for Idaho Transportation Department's Office of Highway Safety since August of 2015. John oversees a diverse team that administers grants, analyzes crashes, and educates the public about good driving behavior. John is responsible for the project that resulted in the creation of Shift Idaho, which is a statewide campaign focused on engaged driving. Prior to becoming the Highway Safety Manager, John worked for 7 years in ITD's Driver Services section as a supervisor and hearing officer in the Civil DUI program. His degree is in communications, and before joining ITD, he worked as a news producer. He enjoys spending time with his wife and 4 kids. John, we really appreciate you spending some time with us today, and welcome to the panel.
Thank you very much. Excited to be here.
Next, we want to introduce Joseph Weiss. Joe is the Transportation Safety Analyst at the New Jersey Division of Highway Traffic Safety. There, Joe conducts comprehensive analyses to support decision-making processes and reports on trends seen in motor vehicle crashes throughout the state of New Jersey, which is no small feat. Prior to joining NJDHTS, Joe was the Operations Director at a Transportation Management Association in Northwest New Jersey, where he managed safety programs, community outreach, and engagement efforts. Joe enjoys spending time with his wife and new baby. Joe, I hope you're getting a lot more sleep these days, but we look forward to your thoughts today, and thanks for being a part of the panel.
Thanks, I'm super happy to be here.
And last, but certainly not least, of our panel today, we have Robert Miles. Robert is the Director of Traffic and Safety for the Utah Department of Transportation. Robert's responsible for serving the people of Utah and providing the best transportation system possible to them. Robert joined UDOT in 2009, and with over 20 years of experience, he has served in multiple capacities and roles at UDOT. Robert has held positions as a rotational engineer, design engineer, structures manager, traffic operations manager, and district engineer, among others. Robert has been instrumental in supporting UDOT's design teams and their focus in incorporating safety improvements as a fundamental part of the state's transportation infrastructure. Robert owns a bachelor's degree in civil and environmental engineering from Utah State University and enjoys spending time with his wife and 4 kids. Robert, thanks again for spending some time with us today and sharing your knowledge with us. Thanks for being here.
You bet, Sean. Thanks for your time.
You got it. So with that, what we want to do next is just really briefly talk a little bit about some of the things we're going to be talking about with today's panel. The goal here today is for all of you attending and listening in to walk away with some practical examples, to feel like there's shared experience in this data journey, and understand how you can actually potentially overcome some of the challenges and obstacles that you may face in becoming a data-driven decision-making organization. We appreciate, again, our panelists taking some time to help discuss some of these topics with us today, and we're really, really happy to dive in on some of this content. One of the things that we hear a lot here at Numetric and talk with a lot of agencies about is there tends to be challenges in building consensus across an agency, whether that's a local municipality, whether that's at the state level, or whether that's simply across departments. Some of the things that we hear are here on the screen, and we'll talk to some of these examples and some of these obstacles that our panelists have seen in their own states and within their own careers. But, the data journey is not something that is easy. It's something that requires effort and requires not just, technology, it also requires change management and other items that can really benefit the long-term decision-making processes of agencies. A couple things just to highlight here, and I hope these things look in some ways familiar, and in other ways I hope they don't look familiar at all and that you're all past these challenges. But some of the things that exist are data silos, privacy and security issues, data sharing, lack of data analytics knowledge, how you actually make decisions from data, among others. And today we're going to talk through some of those things that, again, our panelists have seen. So diving right into the questions and kind of the panel discussion here, wanted to start out with a question for John. John, I know that up in Idaho, you guys have been, creating a data-driven culture for some time. But if you can think back a little bit on, what it was like in the early days, what were some of the obstacles and things that were getting in your way up in Idaho around creating a data-driven culture?
Yeah, Sean, that's a great question. So some of the challenges that we faced, was trying to get the data, try to get it accurate and make sure that we have clean data. So we had agencies that we relied on to get the data to us. And, at first it was like, wait, so what, how come we're doing all this extra work? So it was important for us to ask the why and be able to explain to them why we need that data. We're trying to save lives. We're trying to reduce fatalities and serious injuries. And so helping us by giving us that data was going to help us be able to create this data-driven culture. Another challenge that we had, which I'm sure most everybody's dealt with, is keeping the data secure and stored. Data takes a lot of space. And so we had the challenge of coming up with that. How can we have secure data? How can we have the data housed and be able to access it? So those were some big challenges that we had to overcome.
Yeah, I love just kind of that comment you made about why, right? There's so many reasons why using data to make decisions can be helpful. And And Robert, I know one of the things that we talked about a little bit in UDOT was around kind of data ownership and kind of this notion of like data is power, and if I share too much, I lose power. And I know that's been a bit of an obstacle that, at least in Utah, you guys have been able to overcome. But like, what was that obstacle like, and what were some of the things that you saw around helping people understand why making data available was so important?
Well, that's a great question, Sean. I know within my own group, with my traffic and safety group, we saw that firsthand. The desire to be involved and to have responsibility to make things safer on the road is it's awesome to have that desire, but sometimes that manifests itself differently than we would like it to. We would find people who would have good data sets. They take a lot of pride in owning that data and controlling how it was used, but that limited its impact, its ability to influence the rest of the organization. So what we've strived for here is less of a, this is my data, less of an ownership and control scenario and more of an influence scenario. So the more people we have that are looking at our different data sources, whether it be crash data or whether it be asset management data, the better off we are as an organization.
Yeah, I hear that quite often, and it does seem like, generally speaking, agencies and departments tend to understand that the more accessible you can make the data, the better off you'll be. John, back to kind of something you mentioned, and that was around kind of security and storage, which obviously is a big part of, becoming data-driven, is actually having systems that can manage all the different data sets that are there. Were there like any other, maybe outside of even just the IT side of things, but any other things that were surprising obstacles, maybe more in the range of like change management, that you encountered along the way as well?
Yeah, Sean, so we did have that IT side, but the other issue that came up, we here in Idaho, we don't have a huge population, but our state is a large state. And so we have it broken down into 6 regions. And so how it worked in the past, before we kind of tackled this data-driven approach, is each of the 6 districts within that transportation department, how they would set up their projects for each year is they would submit their ideas, their applications, and the money that was available would be distributed evenly among the 6 regions. And so as we were looking at the data, we're like, wait a second, although it's great for the region, for each of the districts, we really weren't focusing on where can we make the biggest change to save lives. And so when we started taking that data-driven approach and looking at the benefit cost analysis, we came up with better projects, because what we were doing is we were focusing it on what the data was telling us. So it could be that maybe one of the regions, one of the districts didn't get very much money because another district had a lot of projects that scored high on that benefit cost analysis. And so that was a huge shift in culture for us in Idaho, is being able to focus on the data and not just distribute it evenly. Everybody gets the same amount of money. So that really helped with our change management, and it helped make the projects that are being brought forth stronger and saving more lives.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really true. And I think any change, as human beings, change is hard. Did you, either expect, and John, this is kind of back to you, like expect kind of people to resist some of that change as you moved away from kind of an equality approach to a more, what does the data tell us approach? Or like how did people kind of react to some of these changes?
Yeah, Sean, as you mentioned, when we hear the word change and change management, people freak out. It's like, oh no, wait, what are you going to do now? You're going to take me out of my comfort zone and what we've been always doing in the past, and shake things up a bit. So it was, at first, it was a big deal. But as we've seen the improvements in safety, as we have been able to ingrain in people the importance of what the data is telling us and where we should focus our efforts, that has, after the first year or two, and now it's become the norm. It's become the culture that we do focus on data. And if you're going to send in a project, you better have the data to back it up.
Yeah, no, I love that. Joe, one thing that I know is a little different in the state of New Jersey is you guys are a home rule state. You have lots of kind of governing bodies. I think you even mentioned to me that you guys have almost 500 police departments and kind of agencies where things are pretty, you just have a lot of fragmentation in the state. What, how has kind of that process worked for you as you've been making data available, say in comparison to, a state like Idaho where they have kind of these, 6 regions that manage things a little bit more centrally?
That's a good question. So, So New Jersey, we're like the most populated state by a square mile. We have 491 different police departments throughout the state. Every one of them is, has their own administrative staff and chief and captains and their own opinions. And to get everybody on the same page is very difficult on a statewide level. And so there was a huge effort in getting those 400 plus departments to send in their data into the state so we could have like a collective database where we could really analyze statewide projects and safety on a statewide level. And now providing a resource to them where they can interact with their own data, they can actually see the bigger picture now. They can either stay in their small little microcosms and analyze just their data in their town and how it affects them, or they can, some of the towns that are friendly with others and do collaborative, whether it's safety enforcement or education campaigns. We have a lot of regional high schools, so sometimes that's kind of multi-jurisdictional. People can start seeing the data and see the importance of why working together is really important and kind of obtaining that safety goal.
Yeah, I know. I mean, from a safety perspective, when you're able to look at things and collectively make decisions, it can make a big impact. And Robert, I know in the state of Utah, I've worked with you guys for quite some time. You guys have invested pretty heavily in a lot of tools to become more data driven. You guys tend to take a pretty innovative approach on that front. And the other thing, Robert, that I know about you is how much accountability you put on your shoulders as director of traffic safety there at UDOT, that you put a lot of responsibility on your shoulders. How has the data-driven decision-making process impacted UDOT's decision-making process at large? I think you mentioned some things around something similar to Idaho, but how have you seen those benefits, and what are some of the things that you've seen in becoming more data-driven?
Well, I think it changes the way we talked about these topics. In the past, when we looked at safety projects, a lot of it was driven by emotion and anecdotal stories. I've seen this or I've noticed that, and while those have a place, it's hard to really stack those up and measure them apples to apples, if you will. Being more data-driven now, having access to safety data and asset data at different parts of our department, evenly across the department, I should say, has changed that. Changed the way those conversations happen. We're now looking at actual numbers and comparing them in a more scalar fashion. So it's no longer who's got the most influence around the table that helps pick projects or who has the most compelling emotional story. It's really where can we do the most good, and how do we know we're doing the most good is the conversations we're having now. It's honestly been a great way to make decisions, and it's been great to get that information out to the folks in our regions so that they can own that and they can be part of that process more completely.
Yeah, that's great. And Robert, as you've kind of been part of the management side of this as well, have you seen anything, perceptions of people changing, or things that people maybe went into these changes with preconceived notions of it's going to be really hard to do these data driven decisions, or have you seen anything that you would I guess comment on for the folks around how people have kind of seen this in the state of Utah?
Yeah, my experience, going into this, I thought, and my staff thought that making the change from picking projects to fit a budget, like Idaho was explaining earlier, we have regions and we give each region a set amount of money, and then we pick projects to fit those budgets. Going from that to trying to find the highest and best use of dollars throughout the state using a benefit cost ratio, I thought we'd get a significant amount of kickback on that. And what we found is we didn't get nearly as much as we were expecting. In fact, our operations folks in the field were all supportive of making that because they could see the data. They used it daily. They used it in their work processes, and they had trust in it. And so now when we pick our safety projects, instead of just dividing things up equally, quote unquote, we are going to invest the money where the highest and greatest benefit cost ratio manifests itself. And we need to find everything we can do to improve safety on our roadways. Utah is a zero fatality state, and we're serious about that. We're not going to stop until everybody goes home at night safe and sound. We don't want anybody hurt or anyone killed on our roadways, and this is a tool that's going to help us get to that ultimate goal.
Yeah. I mean, it's been so in my role here at New Metric, I get to work with all of our state agencies, especially the three that are on the call today, but our other partners. And one of the things that I get insight into is the things that all of you care about and the things that you're doing. And I've been fortunate to be working pretty closely with Robert and his team in really building out some great enhancements to the New Metric Safety Analysis program and platform. And Robert, one of the things that I know you guys were looking to accomplish was, because you were able to do a lot of things around data. You'd have a report called the OSR, I believe is what you called it.
Sure.
But it wasn't necessarily making it into every project. And so some of the things that we worked on with you was like, well, how can we make a tool that actually gets more information more quickly into the hands of people making decisions? Do you want to talk a little bit to maybe your vision around what we were building together, and then ultimately, how you see that impacting your team going forward in the design process at UDOT?
Yeah. Just as Sean mentioned, in Utah, we use a report called the Operational Safety Report that we call the OSR. And our design teams have been requesting those for close to 20 years now, I bet. I remember when I was a designer, I requested one, and it showed up right about the time I was getting ready to advertise. So it didn't do me a lot of good, even though I read it and I did what I could with it, but I only had a couple of weeks to really make that happen, or really make any changes in our design. We've made some changes to that process, and we're getting them quicker, but we believe we can do better, and we think that the type of data analytics that we're looking at can be done with the crash data. So with the help of New Metric, we're building out a model called Safety Analyst, and the idea there is that we will be able to get safety information in consumable form down to our designers, down to the lowest levels of our design team, the base levels of our design team, if you will. Our youngest designers, so that they can own safety on their own projects, rather than having us be a champion of safety on every project. We think we'll be better off if the designers and the project managers own safety and understand what's influencing the problems that are happening on the roadway and what they can do about it. If they can run those operational safety reports or the safety analyst reports more often and sooner in their concepting processes, then we are more likely to have the budget available in the project to make the changes we want to on the roadway. To me, it's a big deal. To me, I think it'll make a difference in the types of projects that we see go out, and the types of assets that are modified in those projects. Again, as a young designer, I didn't want anyone to be hurt on a project that I designed, but I didn't know exactly how to best influence safety. And I think with the data that we have and the methods that we've identified, that we can put that information in the hands of our designers in a quicker way. And then we as safety professionals can spend our time, rather than pulling the data for them, we can spend our time helping them give context and meaning to it, and helping explain why it's important. Again, it's moving away from that control of information back to the influence of a decision, and the influence through information of a project in this case. So Sean, I hope that wasn't too long of an explanation, but.
No, I think that was spot on, and I agree wholeheartedly. You talked, you said a few times the word influence. And John, I know you're going to be jumping off here very shortly, but I wanted to just maybe ask one more question of you before you hop off. And again, thank you for your time today.
Yeah, definitely.
But as you guys in Idaho, I know you focus a lot of energy with your shift campaign, which is helping educate and bring more awareness to some of the safety issues that exist. As you guys are kind of moving forward and thinking about some of the things to help with that influence, what are you looking to accomplish kind of next with your data, and where are you going? And I know we're working together on some things, but what benefit do you see from kind of that next step that you're looking to take?
Yeah, Sean. So what we're doing now, we've got a robust data system. We get a lot of data from a lot of different agencies across the state, and we are storing it. We're using it. We get a lot of requests each day for specific data requests that they're looking for. So what we are looking to do is make it more of a available to the public, and so have a public-facing component of our data. We're hoping that by doing that, that'll increase the awareness of safety, and it'll bring to life to the public what is really happening in Idaho on our roads. And so by doing that, they'll be able to go in and look at their neighborhood, look at their communities, look at the statewide data, and see where the issues are, and be able to really hone in on what the safety component is. And so we're excited about that. We're excited to be able to have that opportunity to make it more public facing and get the public involved. That's going to influence the individual, it's going to influence the communities, and then it's going to go to the businesses in the state, which is what we're trying to accomplish with our shift campaign.
Yeah, that's great. I was fortunate enough to be up in Lewiston with you guys earlier this spring, and saw the efforts that you guys are putting into that. So looking forward to what you guys can accomplish on that front. And John, thanks again for your time today. We know you got to run, so thanks for everything.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks. So we've talked a little bit about, Idaho's looking to influence, public outreach and talking more to constituents about how they can be, more closely aligned to safety. In Utah, as Robert mentioned, they put a lot of emphasis around, engineering solutions and, calculating benefit cost. And these aren't meant to be an exhaustive list of what these states do. They do a lot when it comes to safety. But Joe, I know one of the areas of outreach that you focus on and put a lot of energy into is connecting with law enforcement as kind of an agency that isn't necessarily inside your own four walls, but it's definitely a partnership that you value and know can make a difference on kind of the behavioral side of things. Talk to us a little bit about what that partnership has looked like, and maybe some of the things that you've done by way of investing in that partnership to make some of these changes happen in your state?
Yeah, so Division of Highway Traffic Safety works. We're out of the, we're a unique state where our highway safety office isn't housed in the Department of Transportation. We're actually housed in the Office of the Attorney General. So a lot of our efforts and grant funded activities goes towards our education partners, such as our AAA Alliance. We have a Brain Injury Alliance, Transportation Management Associations, and a number of other nonprofit organizations that are kind of we call them our boots on the ground individuals that do youth bike training, pedestrian trainings. They do teen driving safety programs, older driver education and outreach. But we heavily do a lot of work with our law enforcement community. So we're not necessarily looking at, crash locations of, where people are running off the road or things where engineering countermeasures could be applied. We're focusing a lot on the behavioral and enforcement side of things. So utilizing our data and putting the law enforcement, so I'll back up by saying the data that we use is being collected by our law enforcement community. They're the ones being called out to the scene. They're the ones collecting and capturing this data. For the longest time, they thought it was, mostly for insurance purposes, but now we provide this resource to them where they can actually interact and interface with that data that they're capturing and collecting, and can now see the benefit of data quality and cleanliness, as well as the importance of getting it in a timely fashion, and what you can do with it. So we've been seeing huge success in before and after type of studies where we continuously fund click it or ticket programs or DUI enforcement checkpoints to drive down impaired driving within a specific region, or highlight some of the locations where speed related crashes are occurring, which may be different from where the local police departments are setting up some of their speed traps. They may actually see difference in where they're setting up their locations compared to where people are actually getting into crashes. And so now as a division, we can kind of look at the problem as a whole and say, we can identify where some of these behavioral or enforceable crash criterias or circumstances are occurring, and then we can target and prioritize our funding to those areas. So that's kind of one of the way we've been using the data, very similar to the engineering world, but just from an enforcement standpoint. Same info, different approach to outcomes.
Yeah, I think that's great. I know you'd also mentioned to me at one point that, the number of reports that you are required to run, or at least have had to run in the past, by making some of this information available to groups like law enforcement has practically cut down a lot of time and energy that you have to spend just, divvying out data. How has that kind of sharing process worked for you guys?
Well, it's helped tremendously, actually. So two different things have happened. One, the complexity to questions being asked, rather the questions we're receiving at the division have become way more complex. So in the past, folks just wanted to know, hey, how many pedestrian crashes happen in my town? Actually, can you tell me the past 3 years? Are you able to do that? To now they want to know, how old were they? What were they doing? What was the vehicle doing? When did it happen? Was it light out? Was it dark out? They really we've created this data-driven community. And so the normal players that we've been working with for decades now, they're starting to ask more and more complex questions to really try to nail down what's happening on the street level. And then the other thing that's happening is, people are seeing the importance of using data in their decision-making processes, right? And so a lot of these folks are, coming to me for, like I said, for deeper questions. We've been able to reach different partners because we provided them a resource. So, for example, Trenton, this is the city that we're housed in, it's our capital. We have a lot of you know, just like a lot of major cities in the United States, we have a lot of other issues other than traffic safety issues. And so limited resources, you know, we have bigger fish to fry. And so the Trenton Police Department never really had a tool to show them, make their jobs easier in actually assessing the traffic safety problem. And so we were finally able to sit down and have a meeting with them over this past year in partnership with our North Region MPO. And once they saw how easy it was to see the data, prioritize location, create a top 10 list of intersections where pedestrian crashes are happening, we're actually launching a pedestrian safety campaign in Trenton for the first time. And I don't know, before I've been doing this, so it's definitely over a decade. And, you know, because we now provide, like I said, that free resource to these local municipalities, it basically gives them their own data analyst without a body. No, not every department can afford or has a data analyst on their department, you know, on their staff. And now the computer system does it for them. They just have to ask the right questions or interact with the data and get answers that they never even knew they had questions for. So it's been pretty powerful for us on that decision-making level in New Jersey and encouraging people to become partners.
Yeah, I love those anecdotes where, you know, people are like, I didn't even know I had that question until they saw kind of this train of thought, right? That takes them down a path that is really insightful and really starts to lend itself to, you know, deep discussion and, you know, things like that. And I mean, a experience I think we had, Robert, one of the times we were reviewing some of the safety analysis recommendations was like the top recommendation wasn't kind of the tried and true best practice, but the data was kind of pointing us in that direction. And I just remember you being like, wow, this is going to blow people's minds. I just think that sort of dynamic with data is really, really interesting.
No, I agree with you, and I agree completely with what Joseph was saying is, you know, that the story that you get from the data, sometimes you don't get to hear all the details of it until you're actually looking at it and playing and you're immersed in it before you find what you're really, really looking for, what you really can use to make a difference. So
yeah, I agree. So maybe just a quick administrative pause. We're nearing the end of our session here today. For those of you that are in attendance, if you have questions for either Numetric or our panelists, specifically Joe or Robert, now would be a good time to start chatting those in so that we can prep kind of for those on the Q&A section of the tool. And we'll hopefully be able to answer a couple of those here towards the end of the call. I think we've had a really robust conversation about, you know, some of the practical obstacles and applications of how this has really helped your states. Kind of as we close up here, Joe, I know one of the things that we've kind of talked about is how, you know, data and this journey tends to be a bit of a learning or a living creature, excuse me. And, you know, one of the things that you mentioned to me was this is not something you can walk away from. Can you maybe just elaborate that on a little bit for the audience today? Like, what did you mean by that, like a living creature?
So, you know, a lot of folks think that, you know, when you're setting up a database, you build it once and then all you have to do is just add stuff to it, add more rows and more rows and more rows. And yes, that's obviously, you know, something that can be automated. But what we've learned is, you know, we collect 149 different data elements, or rather different data fields with a slew of elements within each field in our crash report, but people have 600 questions, right? And so what we've been able to do is actually take the database and merge columns or several columns to create a whole new field of information to answer those deeper questions that we've been receiving. So, you know, one of the things that we found very successful for us in helping the user answer those questions or give us those questions is, you know, providing them just raw data in a way that they can interact with it. They turn around, they ask us questions, and we figure out solutions on how to get them those answers. So, you know, it's a constant give and take. you consistently have to, interact with your community, right? So a police officer, they want to be able to get X, Y, and Z out of a data analysis system. Engineers need A, B, and C, and then you have some of our not-for-profits, our youth educators, or teen driving safety educators, they need F, G, and Y. So you have some overlaps between all of the safety partners, but everyone has a different need and outcome. And so, it's definitely something that constantly needs to be massaged, manipulated, and, we've been able to provide that resource. And like I said, that's just made safety culture kind of paramount to our decision-making processes.
Yeah, I know that just being a part of that process, the data is a thing that tends to move a lot. And Robert, you mentioned something, and I just wanted to have you elaborate on it for our audience, because I thought it was really interesting. But you just said, in preparation for the call today, you can't let perfection be the enemy of progress. What was kind of your maybe experience behind that comment? Because it felt like it came from a place of of been there, done that kind of idea. But what did you mean by that? Robert, are you still with us, or did we have a technical difficulty here?
Sorry about that. We had a local technical difficulty.
Nice. No worries. No worries.
I now know how to use the mute button. So.
Brilliant. Did you hear the question okay?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, great.
I was just saying to myself here that so often folks in our field think that they need to know the end or the final answer before they begin the journey. And I think when it comes to data, when it comes to the type of work we're being involved in, it's different than what I was trained to do in college. It's different than being a traditional engineer. We have to don't wait for the perfect answer. Start the journey now and learn what you can along the way. Always be making progress, but don't wait to take action until you see perfection on this, because there's a lot of good that can be done in the meantime. And I go back to what Joe said earlier, and that people learn questions they didn't know they even had when they start looking at data, or when they start finding these discoveries along the way to whatever they're trying to accomplish. And that's the best advice I can give anybody right now when I talk to my younger engineers is, let's keep moving forward, right? Get to the next logical step. But don't wait on perfection. Let's make progress in the meantime.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And I think, with our collective goal of, reducing and eliminating roadway fatalities, progress is definitely better than trying to wait around for, some silver bullet type of solution. So that resonates a lot with me as far as knowing how data evolves and some of the things that Joe spoke to. In kind of wrapping up from a, prepared question perspective, I wanted to just touch briefly for maybe both you, Joe, and Robert, both of you, to have an opportunity to talk about maybe the impact, right, or a benefit that you've seen that's maybe a little higher level than, just saving time or being more efficient in the office. I think, Robert, you'd mentioned something a little bit about performance metrics and kind of the downward trend that Utah's seen. If you guys have maybe a thought quickly on the impact of becoming more decision or data driven that's led to better decisions, what have you guys seen on that front?
Well, yeah, the one that comes to my mind is we are trying to be more performance metric driven here and data driven, to understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, and what the impact of it is. And one of the measures I look at a lot in the state of Utah is fatalities per 100 million vehicle miles traveled. So our BMT rate. And, in the last 20 years, we've cut that in half. And it's not all on the engineering side. Part of it's on the behavioral side. Part of it's on, the vehicles are being built today, but the entire system together, you know, we've managed to cut fatalities in half in the state of Utah, and fatalities per mile traveled in half. And to me, that's a huge deal. I mean, that number represents real people walking up and down the street. You know, it represents moms, dads, brothers, and sisters making it home. It represents folks that are influencing our society. And so we can't stop doing this work. It's just too important. But yeah, that's what I keep looking at on why we're doing this and why we're trying to strive to make better decisions is I want to get those numbers to zero, and our department wants them there as well.
Joe, any thoughts on that regard as well from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, you know, we've made it easier for people to care. You know, everyone who's in the business of safety and saving lives on the roadway, like I said before, not everyone has an analyst. Not everyone has the savviness to understand how to measure and calculate what's actually happening, what the impact it's having on the roadways, other than just looking at raw numbers. And some folks, because it's a lot of work, won't do it at all. And so we've learned that by providing a resource that does a lot of the thinking for them, it makes them care more. And it makes it easier for them to analyze, what was it last year compared to this year? Oh, wow, look, it's getting worse, getting better. We should do something about it. You know, putting ease of use and taking that technical, you know, side of things out of the equation. Like I said, it's equated to, you know, people caring more about really bringing that number down to zero.
Yeah, I mean, I think just in general, right, the number zero, if we talk about any data point, that's definitely a goal and a data point we can all live with, especially when we talk about serious and fatal crashes. So Joe, Robert, thank you guys so much for your time. We're right here at the end. That went incredibly fast. I can't believe we're already done here. Again, appreciate all of those who have attended the webinar today, and hopefully you've walked away with some maybe inspiration or even some practical ideas of where you could improve and how you can, you know, continue on this journey of becoming better. We have a couple of questions from our attendees, Joe and Robert, if you guys are willing to jump in. We have a question here, and this one is, I'll read this. I think it's from the state of Delaware. Actually, Ian Peters, thanks for being on. And he's asking, how have you dealt with constituents or agencies? He says, in Delaware, our highway safety is under Department of Public Safety, which don't budge when presented with data or insist on anecdotal observations. So he's asking how either of you have kind of seen that, or if you've had, you know, I guess experiences that maybe you've been able to deal with that. How have you dealt with that, and what does that look like in your experiences? I'll kind of let you maybe pause and give you guys a second to, you know, collect your thoughts, but do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I guess I could take a stab at that. New Jersey is very, very politically divided, I guess you can say, and every department kind of has their own opinion about how things should be done and can be done. And similar to Delaware, right, we're housed under the law and public safety side of things as well. So thankfully, our Division of Law and Public Safety, they are very data driven and rely a lot on the data and are supportive of what it is that we do. From a crash reporting standpoint, I can at least kind of reverse it from the bottom up approach. So the data that we're getting on the state level is coming from these police departments. We have some police departments that don't see the need in sending the data to the state. They don't feel the need to share that information with them. and they don't, want to be put in a position where someone is analyzing their efforts. We've had these same individuals come to our classes, whether it's a refresher course on how to actually complete a crash report, the police accident report, or hearing about our system. We call it the crash analysis tool in New Jersey, and they come to my class and they'll say, hey, so I just put it in my town and there's no crashes, or there's 15 and we usually have like 400 a year. Where are they? And they want to be part of they want to be part of the community, but someone at the higher level kind of was restricting the sending or submittal of these crash reports to our NJDOT. And so that has completely changed. We've started seeing people say, hey, can I start sending you 5 years worth of data? We've seen the opposite problem. So it took time. It's taken about 3 years to get new players or I guess old dogs to the game. And so, like I said, I don't know, that's really been our experience in New Jersey. Just kind of, moving forward. I love that quote, right? Don't let perfection keep you from making progress. So we've been trying to make progress, and because we've been making so much progress on a statewide level, and neighboring communities are making so much progress, justifying the need for that $3.5 million pedestrian upgrade in their downtown community. The next door neighbor wants it. They don't have the data because they haven't been part of the the cohesive community of safety. It's kind of like rising the tide for all ships. At least that's been our experience.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for that. That was a great answer. The next question, and I actually was hoping that it would have been great if John was around, but this is from Tasha King. I'm not sure what state you're from, but I think Montana, actually, I'm being told. But the question is, if we have state-specific SPFs, could those be incorporated into the analysis tool? And again, I kind of wish John was here, because I know for a fact, in working with the state of Idaho over the last couple of months, we've been implementing state-specific SPFs to calculate crash ratio under our network screening module, and the results have gone really, really well to be able to pull those really quickly. And I know some of the things that are specific to SPFs have been talked about in both the state of New Jersey and Utah, as we've been talking through kind of the next steps and optimizations that exist there. So the answer to your question, Tasha, is yes. And we'd love to answer your questions, more directly on how that's accomplished and how we do that. But the tool does support that. And then lastly, one final question, and this is just around dirty data. If we have dirty data, and I think, Robert, maybe this one's good for you to answer, just because your quote around perfection is helpful. But how have you guys dealt with dirty data? There's always a component of the law enforcement community putting in data that may be wrong. It may not give you the quote unquote accurate picture. But what are some of the things that you've done in regards to dirty data, maybe QA, QC processes or things like that?
Well, I think we've been helped a lot with our partnerships here in the state of Utah, where we work very closely with our highway safety office. So when it comes to cleaning up data that comes in from the field, they are the best partners you could possibly have. They work really hard and really diligently on that. But I think, honestly, one of the things that made a lot of difference here in the state of Utah was the ability to visualize that data, to get more people access to it. When officers suddenly realized that there was a rash of crashes around their home, because that's where they were filling out their crash reports and that's where they were geocoding to, that changed an understanding in that officer's mind as to why it's important to geolocate appropriately. We just had a ton of those experiences where once people see the data and see the impact of what they're doing, that they become more vested in its ownership in keeping that data in good shape.
Great. Thank you guys for those answers. And just in closing, again, we here at Numetric can't thank our panelists enough for taking a lot of time, not just in preparing for this call, but obviously, spending time with us today. They've been willing to put their email addresses here for those that might want to reach out directly and have some peer-type conversations about things going on in their states, what it's like to work with Numetric, whatever the conversation may be. Their email addresses are here. And also from a Numetric perspective, if you have technical questions or things related to the tool, we also have one of our solutions engineers email address here, Jake Mawai. But again, we're at noon. We are so grateful for everybody spending time with us today. We love the opportunity that we have here at Numetric to be building a community of influencers around how to make safety an even more compelling component of the processes that we put in place, and are grateful for that opportunity that we have to do that. We'll be sending out the recording of this webinar here in the next couple of days. And if you have questions, comments, or things you'd like to discuss with us or any of the panelists afterwards, feel free to reach out. But we appreciate, again, everyone's participation today and hope everyone has a great and wonderful day. Thank you. Bye-bye.